Hello again, rail fans. You know, it is really something to be able to go up and chase trains in a place that you've heard about your whole life, but have never been to. But what makes it even better is when you get there and everything was doubly better than everything you've ever heard about it. That's what happened to me recently when I was invited up to the land west of Washington, D.C. to not only go rail fanning, but to speak at the Northern Shenandoah Chapter of the NRHS. Just a great bunch of people up there. They also took me rail fanning out to that land west of Washington, D.C., where Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland all come together. Our first stop of the day was at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. The old B&O train depot sits up the hill from the little town, which is situated at the confluence of the Shenandoah and Potomac rivers. It's also where three state lines brush up together. On the other side of the Potomac is Maryland. Across the Shenandoah River is Virginia. I am moved by what this is, the big railroad, America's first one, the Baltimore and Ohio main line to the west. Presidents, movie stars, and generations of everyday Americans have ridden trains right through here. The railroad dominates the landscape with two massive bridges across the rivers, then a junction, and then the tunnel that carries the tracks a short distance through to the other side of the mountain in Maryland. Today we're rail fanning the area where all three of those states meet up in a region of mountains, rivers, and railroads. We'll be predominantly on the B&O main line that ran and still runs from Washington, D.C. out to Pittsburgh and points west. In this area, we're rail fanning the CSX Metropolitan and Cumberland subs and the Norfolk Southern Hagerstown district. We're not waiting long here when we start hearing somebody on the radio. Crossing the state line from Maryland into West Virginia, it's M277. Daily auto rack empties from Twin Oaks, Pennsylvania to Osborne Yard at Louisville, Kentucky. The Harper's Ferry train station is nice because of the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit for freight trains. It lets you see a little more of the train than when it's going 50. The town, founded way back in 1763, hasn't changed a lot since the 18th century, mainly because it rests inside a national park, the Harper's Ferry National Historical Park. Down the hill, the wood trestle carries the Shenandoah subdivision to Winchester, West Virginia. Not many trains run this line, so we were lucky to catch this guy, GO99, unit grain coming out of the yard down at Brunswick, Maryland, and headed for the Miller Milling Company in Winchester, Virginia. It's not a lot of places where you can see a wood trestle like this up close, especially from the underside. It dramatically illustrates the classic trestle, a bridge characterized by a framework of repeated open supports, each carrying short spans. The structure brings the track away from the junction at the tunnel, which is much higher than the surrounding ground level here in the town. I can't help but wonder, did the B&O build this trestle like it sits today? Or did the chassis system upgrade it to support today's larger, heavier trains? In any case, the bridge is very impressive. While not very tall, it is one of the largest wood trestles I have ever seen.
At the milepost location VAD 1.5, the GO9911, with your leader CSXT 3110.
Walking back up to the depot, we pass this tiny fire station, and a look at the historical plaque in the front reminds me of why I've known the name Harper's Ferry. In 1859, this is where anti-slavery crusader John Brown made his last stand against a U.S. Army squad out to capture him. The little firehouse is preserved as a landmark. We're back on the platform in time for an eastbound ethanol train, B701, out of Proviso, Illinois, to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is Trent Wolf, a member of the Northern Shenandoah National Railway Historical Society, and our guide for the day. Trent knew everything we needed to make this a successful railfan day. So far, so good. And that's Jeff Summerlin over there across the track with the camera, Vice President of the chapter and my other guide for the day. At 11:14, in came P030, the eastbound Amtrak Floridian. This is the recently combined train made out of the Capital Limited from Chicago and the Silver Star out of New York.
Come back with that.
After his station stop here at Harper's Ferry, he goes on to Washington, where he then turns south on the RF&P toward Alexandria, Virginia, Hamlet, North Carolina, Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, and Miami.
2 more car 32. 1 more car 31. Set him down where you get 30.
Last answer, over. Alright, 30. Cruising and clicking that's on the platform, ready for that second move. Put me down 7 cars, 7.
Because of its short platform, Harper's Ferry is a two-stop station. First for the coaches, and again for the sleeper passengers.
5 cars, 35. 4 cars, 34. 3 cars, 33.
PO30 carries 3 sleeping cars. One of them is marked First Class Sleeper. I don't know what the difference is. When he gets them stopped, the Floridian's locomotive is in Maryland and the rear-end baggage car is in West Virginia.
Stage work is complete. Close up in the clear. We get the block.
When passengers are all aboard, the side lights indicate brakes are released and the Floridian heads toward Washington, D.C. The rear baggage car has graphics I had not yet seen. While I like the larger trademark, I do prefer the Phase 4 livery that most of the rest of the train is in. We knew the Norfolk Southern office car special was coming into the territory today, but before we went out to meet him, we broke off here and went to lunch. Then we headed for the old Norfolk and Western Main Line at Boyce, Virginia.
Good day, clear signal 45.90.
We weren't here long when in came NS-27A, fast intermodal, Rutherfordton, Pennsylvania to Atlanta, Georgia. This is a big business train with major blocks of J.B. Hunt, and Swift containers. Plus, many of those green boxes are EMP, Equipment Management Pool, an interline program operated jointly by Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. .27A is also carrying some piggyback trailers, including these from ECM Transport. And after another block of containers, there's a whole nother train back there with a pair of AC-44 C6M rebuilds pulling. If there were people living in those containers and trailers, 27A would have been its own congressional district. Now more JB Hunt boxes, more ECMs in with some Werners, and some UPS on the bottom. For a very small town, Boyce, Virginia had a good-sized Norfolk and Western passenger depot that's still standing. The N&W apparently had no intention of building such a large station for such a small, unincorporated town. However, the area's few but wealthy settlers wanted a big, showy railroad station, and according to legend, they raised the money and had Norfolk and Western build this fancy depot. I got word from Trent, who was up the line at another station, that the business train was finally headed our way. At 1613, around the curve and into Boyce came NS 955. Led by two shiny, clean SD-70 ACEs in Norfolk and Western Tuscan red and NS black and white. This is one of the most impressive executive trains in the nation, but in 14 seconds, it was gone. It was 34 degrees and windy early next morning at Point of Rocks, Maryland. But for the young people who would join up with me here, 34 degrees was nothing. Point of Rocks isn't photogenic like Harper's Ferry, but it is beautiful in its own way. The centerpiece, the old B&O passenger station, is just fabulous, and the train density is pretty good too. Point of Rocks is a junction where the old mainline sub joins the Metropolitan sub, the B&O main line. The two subs join up right in the front of the old station building. The old main line runs eastward for about 52 miles, where it joins up with the Capital sub at Baltimore. 0831, and things begin to liven up at Point of Rocks, Maryland. Coming through the junction is eastbound C37311. The third unit is part of a group of engines considered to be a rare catch, a CSX GE in YN2 paint. Behind the locomotives are loaded coal hoppers out of Grafton, West Virginia, headed for Dominion Energy's Wateree, South Carolina power plant. What appear to be the junction signals at Point of Rocks are actually distant signals. This is the first territory that I've seen these D plates on CSX signals. They're reminders for push-pull commuter train crews, MARC in this case, where they pass an absolute signal before stopping at that station. 0846, it's M276, eastbound auto racks out of Avon, Indiana for Twin Oaks, Pennsylvania. While shooting this train, I noticed in the viewfinder how all the signal bungalows here were elevated, like stilt houses. It would be later in the day when I learned the reason for this. I can just imagine how busy this and other stations are along this line as suburban residents board trains to commute into Washington, D.C. Not knowing this area whatsoever, I had some real help from these young folks in getting me to good locations. That's Gus on the left and Trent on the right. Trent was our guide for both days. 0901, M276's westbound counterpart, M277 rolls into Point of Rocks with auto racks headed for Osborne Yard in Louisville, Kentucky. Those yellow signs are not advertisements for Drayton Blackgrove's YouTube channel. They're actual delay and block signs to remind passenger train crews to remember the aspect and indication of the last absolute signal they passed. And if you haven't checked out Drayton Blackgrove's YouTube channel, you should. He's got great railroad information on there. Just search Delay in Block. Far back from the track, it's easy to see why Point of Rocks is such a popular rail fanning spot. Without their leaves, the trees don't show how windy it is here this morning, and chilly. About 34 degrees when I got here, and it hasn't warmed up much. My railfan guides decided that we needed to move out to a place called Shenandoah Junction to catch some Norfolk Southern moves. This is where the old Norfolk and Western Hagerstown to Roanoke line flies over the CSX. We set up about a quarter mile south on the NS line because it has better light and it's far more open. I love how NS puts the names of its major locations on signs. There's no doubt about where you are. The guys were not wrong about Shenandoah Junction. About 10:30, the first train arrived. It was NS 13R. 13R has one GE locomotive leading and a very railfan-friendly engineer at the controls. It's general merchandise freight out of Enola, Pennsylvania, bound for Linwood, North Carolina. At 11 a.m. brings up NS 25A. Double-stacked containers out of Croxton, New Jersey for Inman Yard, Atlanta. This job also carries a big block of J.B. Hunt boxes. After 25A, we moved back down to the flyover and the CSX main line, the Cumberland Sub. This is a beautiful shot that you can see for 7/10 of a mile down the track. The signals guard a set of crossovers named Shen, which I guess is short for Shenandoah. Coming eastward out of Grafton, West Virginia for Baltimore's Curtis Bay Terminal is CSX C787, loaded coal. After the coal train, we broke off and headed to Brunswick, Maryland. The guys knew there wouldn't be any trains coming through there soon, but I wanted to see it anyway, and we all wanted lunch, and there was a place in Brunswick that sounded pretty good. Brunswick, Maryland, another stop on the B&O Washington to Chicago main line. This is only about 5.5 miles east of where we started yesterday in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. I immediately noticed the signal bungalows here in Brunswick surrounding the old freight yard, all elevated, really up there. It turns out that this part of western Maryland has seen its share of bad floods. This one in March of 1936 submerged the whole railroad yard here. So today, CSX doesn't take any chances. All of the signal bungalows in this Potomac River territory are elevated. The tower on the hillside used to be on the other side of the tracks, but a preservation group managed to save it, and together with CSX, they moved it across the track and up the hill to be part of a railfan attraction here. The group, Preservation Maryland, has a great time-lapse video of the move right here on YouTube. As I said, the guys knew there weren't going to be any trains while we were here, so we broke off for lunch. The recommended spot was up the hill at Boxcar Burgers. I liked all the railroad decorations, especially the photos of some better graffiti. They have lots of stuff on the menu, but made-to-order burgers are the specialty. I got mine with cheese, bacon, and a side of fries with a no-sugar A&W root beer. $19.75 plus tax and tip, and delicious. Now, my thanks to all the folks at the Northern Shenandoah Chapter of the National Railway Historical Society for all their hospitality, especially to Jeff Summerlin and Van Welton. Thank you guys so much. I spoke at their annual banquet and had a phenomenal time. The audience was just great. I didn't want to leave that night. Now, I promised to do it on one condition, that they would take a day and show me some of the area's railroading, and they came through unbelievably. So I also have to thank Trent Wolf, Gus Root, and Sean O'Keefe, all three of you guys, plus all of the guys who joined us out there on Friday and Saturday for all-day rail fanning at the places you've just seen. Great people, great place, and great weather. A little chilly and windy, but it didn't matter. Those guys put me on trains, and it was awesome. Got a new sign on the fence back there. Thank you very much. This past February at the Jacksonville Train Show, a fellow stopped me and said, "I got a sign for you if you'd like to have it." The fellow's name was Stephen Seifert. He's from Albany, Georgia, and he said, "I've got a G plate that indicated a grade signal, which means if you've got a heavy train and you come upon this signal and it's red, you can keep moving if you slow down to restricting speed. But it saves an engineer the trouble of stopping a train on a hill that he might not be able to get going again." So many thanks to you, Stephen Seifert of Albany, Georgia. I owe you a barbecue lunch for that one. All right, let's hear from all you folks. Write your comments down below in the comments section. I read them all and try to reply to as many as I possibly can. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. And let's make plans to meet up again soon somewhere out there on the high iron. And until we do, This is Danny Harmon, out.